welcome, everyone. This is such a great treat today. I'm so happy to have George Pace here. George has talked a lot about AI and more recently ChatGPT, and I thought it'd be an amazing opportunity and perfect timing, as it turns out, to have the conversation today. So, in the meantime, I'd love to know where everyone is checking in from. We had so many people sign up for it. And as we go through the presentation, we'll, if you have questions, we'll definitely, you know, get to those as well. But George, I'd be just curious to get a sense. I mean, how did you actually get? I know you were Prudential for a while, but how did you actually get started down this road?
That's a good question, Ken. I've always been a new technologist, or a I understood at a very early age in my career that technology was always changing, shall we say?
Uh-huh.
So very early in my career, I was in a an R&D group at Prudential, as it were, and I was really exposed to not only the technologies, but how do you look at them from a business perspective.
Hmm.
So it's really something that's stayed with me for some time. Now I'm frozen here, Ken. Is that me
You're
or
frozen. You're frozen.
no? Why am I frozen? That's interesting.
While we wait for George to get back with our technical challenges, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what ChatGPT is actually all about. ChatGPT is something
I'm
which
back.
we've. Oh,
Okay,
okay,
there I
no
am.
problem.
I don't know what happened there.
Life. Okay, so
Life. So yeah, so I've always, let's put it this way, I've always been, and then which has really learned, which has given me the opportunity to, um, how do I say this? Identify those technologies that are of interest or I think are going to be impactful. So that's
all right.
basically how it started.
So when you get a chance and want to put the presentation down, we can actually maybe go through some of the slides and get a sense of exactly
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
we're
Here,
going to be chatting about. Because I think, um,
up,
no,
sure.
wrong one.
Silly. Hang on.
Meantime, I'm looking to
There
see
we go. There we
all
go.
the different. Yep. Okay, so we're going to add this to the stream. And George, why don't you take it away? And I'm going to just take a look at the chat for some
Sure.
comments and things that come up. But if anyone has questions, George, would you prefer that we wait till the end, or would you?
It
Are
doesn't
you
matter. Well, let's just see how it goes
okay?
based on the
Sure,
questions.
sure.
So, good afternoon, everyone. What I did was I put some slides together to give you a sense as to how I look at this space, what I think people need to understand about ChatGPT. So we can go through these quickly. I can go again, take questions as they come up. But oops, and I guess it helps if I bring focus over here. So the first one, for those that may leave, these are all the different ways you can watch this content. I've been streaming my content for the past, I don't know, 2.5 years, 2.5 years live. My streaming channels are either, again, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. My video repository is YouTube. So I have all the digital properties on Keep Pace. I'm
Hmm.
doing a Substack on this. So again, I'm going to bring this up again at the end. I just wanted to, in case anybody drops off,
So
these are just the
a
different
couple
ways
of
to,
questions. Couple
yeah,
of questions first. Can we? People want to know if they can get copies of the slides. So if you
I'll make a PDF of it for you guys. Sure.
okay, sure. And then
Sure.
one question I got was, what are the best prompts for ChatGPT? Is that something you're going to be talking about along the way?
Maybe
Right.
we'll get to that. That
All
might
right.
have to be that might be a follow up, Ken.
And we were actually talking about doing a second one too. This is
Right.
being recorded, just so you know. You can go back and watch this recording anytime. So, okay,
So
go for
let's get started. So for those that don't know, or for those that don't stay on top of this stuff like I do, last night actually the news wires were two different things. Now, right now, Microsoft is announcing, and I have not seen the announcement, but they're talking about their integration of Chat GPT into Bing, which is really what the question has been for some time as to what Google's response is going to be. I have a slide later in the deck on this. Google announced yesterday this thing called Bard AI, which is based off of their Lambda work. So
it.
the competition is now about to heat up. But what I want everybody to do is kind of take a deep breath and just follow this, because you'll understand as we get a little bit deeper. So as of today, or as of tonight, I'm going to have a much better sense as to where these are, how we get access to them, etc. Um, as with most new technologies, there is a ton of hype. And as soon as people think about this, magical thing that's generating all of this content, these are the numbers, right? 100 million users in 2 months. I don't think any product has ever gotten that acceptance or that usage that quickly. And again, it's a lot of hype. So let's just bear with me a couple of seconds. And then the second one, you can get overwhelmed relatively quickly if you listen to the things that they've challenged ChatGPT with. And one of them is the Wharton MBA test, the US medical licenses exam. If you think about it, this engine, as it were, has sucked in all of this content. So the fact that it can answer these questions, which is in essence like memorization, if you want to think of it that way, really isn't that surprising. So yeah, it's kind of impressive that it can do that, but remember, it's a test. Now, there's also this, what do we do about this moment? And one of the things that's interesting is it's so new and so disruptive that different entities or different organizations are treating this with what do we do? So the first is they're blocking Chat GPT on school devices and networks. That was one. There was a New York professor that, one was don't use Chat GPT. There was another announcement, I think it was the end of last year, where a student actually submitted a paper that Chat GPT generated. So now that the tool is out there, you're going to see experimentation. You're going to see good actors. You're going to see bad actors. This is not anything that's new, right? We've seen this kind of before. It's just we've never seen a tool potentially this powerful doing it. So we still have to figure out what the best practices are around this and how do we best use this tool rather than be scared of the tool. And that'll be a theme through the remaining slides. Now, here's the first thing you got to realize. This sounds really great. This sounds really smart. You're going to hear doomsday predictions. Now, is it going to impact things? Yes. Will there be disruption of jobs or the way certain jobs are done? Yes. But it's not the end of the world. It's another tool. And what we're going to see is once people get an understanding of what it can do and what it can't do, then people are going to the excitement's going to come down a level. So right now, this is not the end of the world, right? Everyone likes to think, oh my God, AI is taking over. From my perspective, I can always go up and turn the power off to the computer. The AI is not going to stop me from doing that.
It almost reminds me a little bit of when anything came out. I remember when Wikipedia came out. I even remember when the internet came out. And there's this fear of the unknown. And I think the more you understand it, the better. It has limitations, but I go back to different technologies for sure.
Oh yeah, and I get it again. If typically it's been very hard in a world where information comes at you very quickly to stay current with many of these pieces and parts. So again, it can be scary if you're just looking at this for the first time. I get it. So here is the first thing to walk away with. AI is not sentient. It is not this all-knowing, all-powerful thing that's going to outsmart humans. It's not there yet. I know that 2 years ago, there was a Google engineer that saw something internal that was called Lambda that said he felt it was sentient. It's not sentient yet. And even for what ChatGPT can do today, this was an article that came out on Time about a month ago, I think it was, that OpenAI actually used Kenyan workers to make GPT less toxic. Realize this took in, and I've got a link about this later on, it trained itself on all of the information that was available on the internet as of 2019. So it took in all types of things in terms of, political and racist and all these other things that exist in the internet that they needed to go in after the fact to basically dial down or turn down. If you had a sentient being, you really wouldn't have to do this. So there's certain components of this that you're seeing a finished product in a sense. You need to understand how the product was assembled. So again, this is one of them, that it wasn't all magic by ChatGPT. There was actual human intervention that did fine tuning. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from today's presentation, there's a lot, but one thing in particular, and there's two different slides that do basically the same thing. Gartner has this thing they call the hype cycle, which is on the right-hand side, where they've got this thing of there's a technology trigger, there's a peak of inflated expectations, and then there's this thing they call the trough of disillusionment. We're kind of in here right now. We haven't hit the disillusionment phase. We will. We always do. And it's a normal function of everyone who gets so hyped about these things that it's the next, biggest and best thing. And then you start to find the limitations in it. And we will find the limitations. Now, it's scary because one of the commandments that I have is anything that can be automated will be automated. And one of the things that GPT is going to be used to do is automate or generate things that are rote, that are manual, right? That, that don't necessarily have a value if a human does them. This other particular one I saw was a LinkedIn link. This is actually HFS is another think tank. And it basically takes Chat GPT and kind of, for all intents and purposes, aligns it to this idea of the hype cycle. So just understand all the hype we're seeing right now. We're at the top of this, my opinion. We've seen this before. And again, it's not perfect. It's not exact. We're going to find the holes in it. That's what the next 2 years is going to be about. So a couple of things I wanted to share with you to whet your appetite in terms of what I look at, what I share on my webinars, what I share on Substack, are basically what's the competition, because this is not going to be the only game in town. To me, this is about the frameworks and data flows, which, again, I don't see many people talk about. I'm asking, like, hey, how does this, we probably need to know a little bit more about how this was built. What are the evolving use cases and ecosystems? Real quick about cost models, and then a little bit about governance and safety. So the first thing here, and again, I got this, I think this was off of a LinkedIn. ChatGPT, it was first out of the gates. So it's getting the brand recognition. Believe it or not, behind the scenes, Google has had a number of these things they've been working on. Lambda is one, and that's what the Bard.
So George,
yeah,
it's a little hard to read all this, but what are all the different boxes? I mean, or is it are they different levels of the process, or how does that?
Don't worry about the boxes. Just
Okay.
worry about just consider each one of these engines.
Okay, just wanted to, for the audience's purpose.
Yeah, thank you. So Google Lambda was the one that the Google engineer 2 years ago said was sentient. They've since come out with one, and this was a recent one, about an investment in a company called Anthropic, and theirs is called Claude. There was another one that Google has a subsidiary called DeepMind and Sparrow. And the one that's being announced now is called Bard, B-A-R-D, and Bard is based off Google Lambda. Now, a couple of things I thought about as I assembled this slide. Realize a few things. If we think about car manufacturers, well, there's only a handful of car manufacturers because there's a lot of work and a lot of capital required to build a car. You have regulations, you got to build the plants, you got to get the people. I see these engines being similar in effect because you have to train them. It takes a while to train them. You're going to need people to groom the data. So in essence, I don't expect to see a large number of competitors in the space, but we will see competitors. So when you hear ChatGPT-3, that's getting the lion's share of the attention. Realize that there's the potential for other similar engines. And that's the battle I think we're going to see over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, if I had to guess. Now, this is something that I put it together in January. And as I'm learning, I need to update this, but here's the general idea behind this diagram. For the most part, if we follow this big rectangle at the bottom, you're going to have either applications, digital assistants, chatbots, don't really care what that interface is going to be. And you're going to make queries. The Chat GPT-3 model, or GPT-4, which is supposedly coming, but no date, and it's going to give you a response. Now, this is the magic that everybody sees. But now my questions get into, well, wait a minute. If we wanted to use this in a business setting, if we wanted to use this for customer service as an example, well, we know that ChatGPT has been trained, and again, it's in a blog entry that I have, on a lot of internet-based content. Now, here's the challenge. This is all generic. If you had a company that sold widgets and you wanted to use this to help your customer interactions, well, ChatGPT is going to be smart enough to break down the response and say, here's what the individual wants to know. But how do you take that question and map it to the back end? Well, I don't think anyone's figured that out, or it's not something that's off the shelf that you make work today. A second thing might be, how do you effectively train this based on your industry or your specifics? So we know that the medical industry is looking at this. I'm sure the legal industry is looking at this. So right now, ChatGPT, we'll call it more of a generic engine that could be trained on any corpus of data, medical, programming, legal. It doesn't really matter. So I would expect over time that you might see customized versions of this. Right now, ChatGPT is kind of the all-knowing, all-powerful version, but they're also working on ways to customize pieces of it, such as writing code, I know is one, that will evolve this model. So for the average person that uses ChatGPT, you're going to tend to just focus on this box. If you're in a business setting and you start asking questions about integration or testing or, you know, specific answers to specific topics, you're going to start worrying about how you feed this beast, and more importantly, how do you maintain this beast? Another piece that's not even talked about in this particular diagram, but gets important. What's the difference between right versus accurate versus wrong? Because at the end of the day, if it's pulling from all of these different sources, you know, if I wanted to use the old who shot JFK, well, there's some people that think he was shot by a lone gunman, and there was other people that think it was a conspiracy. How does this model answer that question? So again, it gives you the sense of it. We have to even define what accurate versus right is. This is why it's going to take some time. And when I talked earlier about this trough of disillusionment, we got to kind of take a deep breath and say, all right, it's going to be good at certain things, but other things we may need to learn how to question it to get a better answer.
So George,
Yeah.
I mean, how does this affect the average person out there? I mean, in all that. For example, from a job search perspective, we use ChatGPT to maybe help us. People get interviewing questions responded to. Recruiters do things. Business owners do things. I think the challenge is really from the very beginning. How does someone go on ChatGPT right now? I mean, um,
Well, you can go to ChatGPT right now. If you go to the OpenAI, I forget the exact URL, it's openai.com GPT chat or something like that. You can register for a free account. Now, it has limitations as part of that free account. You can't always get to it. There is a fee-based version of it that's, I believe it's $20 a month.
Yeah, they just rolled it out to $20. So if someone wants to go on now, and I think with the $20 you get additional. I think you have more access, or it's a faster speed or something.
Right. Yeah, you're going to get some, and you probably won't get hit with the, too busy error message or something like that. Right. Once you start paying for it, you get into a higher tier of service. Um, Again, I found it's a matter of what time of day you access it. Sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's easier to access than others. Um, but yeah, the one best practice I would tell people is if you haven't used it yet, start learning how to play with it so that you can learn to ask better questions and you can understand the types of outputs you're going to get. Ask it questions that you know the answers to so that you can get acclimated to it. Might not always generate the answer that you think. And I think that's kind of a little caution. Just don't take the now you'll find it does some funny things, by the way. I think one of the funniest ones I've come up with so far is write a resignation letter in the style of Dr. Seuss. That one's pretty funny. It comes up with the rhyming. It comes up different every now and then, but um and a couple other things that, again, these are all just tastes of
Right.
things that I show. Um One of the ones I just learned today was that there's
Mhm.
actually people, and there's always good actors and bad actors.
Uh-huh.
There's this one project called Dan Do Anything Now, where they're trying to jailbreak GPT's own rules or have it die. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Um, Red Hat is doing some stuff on Chat GPT automation and its infrastructure tools on Ansible. Microsoft, it's going to be a huge component of Microsoft Office. Now,
Mhm.
what does that mean from the perspective of what do I have to pay for and what pieces of that are Microsoft Office enabling to be seen? And then the very last one, which is very interesting, is ChatGPT made a free tool for detecting AI generated text.
So a
So
couple,
for,
couple of
yeah,
questions. Has ChatGPT raised any copyright issues yet?
yes. So the first answer to that question is there's actually 2 or 3 lawsuits that are going on right now. The idea isn't so much, well, it is on copyright, but the general idea is that because it was trained on existing pieces of art and it can mimic in its responses
Hmm.
things that are similar to that. There's two. There's one on DALL-E, DALL-E, which is the image version of this, and then there's one for Chat GPT, which is the same. Actually, it's a third one. I think the third one is on GitHub for the generation of code. So there's this idea of where is the line between what Chat GPT can learn from and then um, what it generates. So yes, the answer is there's 3 lawsuits, if I'm not mistaken.
So, which I know that there's here in New Jersey, there's I think a Princeton student has figured out a way for you to determine if something is is from ChatGPT or not, and that's going to be the catch up. You know, how do you know if something is ChatGPT or specific to a person's tone? So it's always going to be trying to stay one step ahead, I guess, of that.
Supposedly,
Yeah.
supposedly, I haven't. This was the case in December of last year, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a student that used ChatGPT to generate, some 500-word essay or whatever it was,
Mhm.
and there's a certain style that it has at the moment that they say is like around a 12th grade student's work. So
Right.
supposedly you can pick up those pieces as part of that analysis. I expect it's going to get better over time, but now we get into this other place for those that know little of AI. This whole thing of explainable AI, in a sense, this whole detection piece is the flip side of, yeah, zero GPT. Thank you, Doctor Scott, Doctor Dell. That was yeah, that was it. And I don't know this other one. There's a Chat GPT's creator, so you're going to see much like we saw multiple antivirus manufacturers come out. We're going to see, I'm sure, multiple solutions to do the same thing. Because again, this is going to be a moving target, right? You don't know how it's trained, so the question is, how do you get explainable AI after the fact?
Which leads me to wonder: is it going to be something like a dark Chat GPT versus a non, like we have the
Oh,
dark web? I mean, again,
I'm sure. I'm
you know,
sure. I'm sure. The cost models are evolving. You can get the Chat GPT free today, right? You can go to the site
right.
with its limitations. It will be interesting to see what they allow you to do in Bing or in Google. So that in
Mhm.
essence will be free. And then there's going to be this whole fee ecosystem of, Microsoft Office isn't free. If you want to write APIs to go against it, if you're in an enterprise setting, that won't be free. If other products decide to embed it, that won't be free. So it's going to be interesting to watch what these cost models look like. And again, um, we know of some of them, and the others we can take an educated guess on.
Do we know if this now is this available in multiple languages yet, or I mean, or is it just the United States? I mean, who actually?
Someone put up it. The access right now is U.S. based. I know it can do some translation, but I haven't gotten into the whole language. Um,
Oh, here, this is like you just need to tell it give
I'll
output
put
in
XXS. Yeah,
XXX, and you can prompt it in English.
I'm not surprised because Google Translate does this. So the fact that it can translate that, I'm not that surprised.
The other thing that most people don't realize is I think now it's only updated to a 2020 or 2021 in terms of content. Or
2019.
so then what happens? How often is this going to be updated? I mean, are
Hmm.
they going to be able to update this in real time, or is it always going to be a couple of years behind? And any thought about that?
Well, you always just need to look at examples. So the closest example I could give you that works is all the work that Tesla is doing on self-driving. So
Hmm.
every day, a Tesla is getting information from the cars of what they're doing on the road. Now, what they do is they're not releasing new models of their full software, whatever it is, the full self-driving software. They release that in chunks, right? So I can't imagine. Well, in some instances, I could see where they could update it if it was just general in nature. But if we get back to all those things about bias and all those other things you want to protect,
Right.
I got to believe there's going to be some lag between how this thing is getting trained and how it actually releases new updates, just from a safety perspective.
And this is very true. Your number one mantra needs to be ChatGPT is all about words, not facts.
Yep.
Any correct result is an X. Is just a, I mean, that's why I can't do math.
Well,
I mean,
well, this gets back, Nicole, to, is it right? Is it accurate? Is it, like, we're going to have to figure out, what does it really mean to get that answer? To me, we always talk about what are the skills of the future. Critical thinking is going to be one of them. And in this particular case, we're going to need to get people, because it's going to be easy to say, well, ChatGPT told me it must be true. That's going to be an interesting nut to crack. I'll just say that. Another thing that's out there is this whole governance and safety. And again, I won't really delve into this, but again,
wait, do you want to put your presentation back up? I wanted to make sure to get to questions and things.
So I'm sorry. I was up. I'm sorry.
Well, no, because I figured we would just chat.
Oh, you go. I'm sorry. You can put it. I'm sorry. I was moving through some screens. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot this. So
no, that's okay. I just wanted to balance.
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
Yep.
So, there's some other things in terms of what does governance or safety mean. There's been a number of organizations that have been looking at this to create the rules or the guidance. I just learned, believe it or not, this thing of constitutional AI. I had to go read up on that a little bit. Threat assistant versus a tool, how do you really look at these types of things? Again, I think there's, we always talk about these things as being technical or technology focused. I think there's going to be a fair amount of governance. So if you're in that governance, risk, and audit space, I think there's going to be a lot of activity just to keep these things honest, just to be able to go back and get back to, again, we talked about the accurate versus right. So again, I think if you're into that particular space, I think you'll find more than enough to chew on.
And this is important too. Don't enter anything into these tools, which is internal data, customer information, etc.
Oh yeah. Well, we didn't even get to the, again, we could bring all this up on a separate, another conversation, Ken. But
I want to,
PII, PHI. Yeah. What is that really going to mean? How do we protect it? Right. Again, and it gets back to where I started the presentation with about, we haven't got to the trial of disillusionment yet, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is great. This is wonderful. Do not assume, let me emphasize that. Do not assume all of these pieces are figured out. They're not. We're figuring them out as we go. So again, in the time allotted, this was just kind of a snapshot of some of the things that I focus on, that I'm looking at, that are helping me shape my vision as to, how I think about it and how I help people think about this. I gave you the link. It's on, I'll give you the next slide. You can follow me. I would tell you to experiment whenever possible. I remember about 7 years ago, when the Alexa first came out, and I told people for $25, $50, whatever it was, start learning how you're going to talk to these devices. And the same advice applies today. Start understanding what the capabilities of this thing are. And if you're going to be impacted, be proactive on this, not reactive.
What are the best ways to ask? I'm going to go back to just the two of us right now.
Sure.
So what are some of the best ways to ask questions? I mean, I know I try different types of wording in a question to get different types of answers. Is there a certain format or something?
It's a good question. And I don't know, Ariel, if I have a good answer. Let me say this to you.
Well, just treat like you're asking someone like you're chatting with a friend, I guess.
Well, let's break this into two pieces. Remember, ChatGPT is not yet conversational. So let's kind of break these things into pieces. Right now, it's a more sophisticated way for you to ask a question. For it, well, let's talk about what ChatGPT is at the end of the day. If you went to Google and you did a Google search, you learned the quote unquote language of Google, right? And you learned how to do a search, and then you were presented with pages. You probably rarely got to the second page, and you formulated your own answer based on what was given. So that was kind of search. Now what they're saying is you're going to ask it a question, and you're trusting this engine to basically take all those search results and mine you back an answer. Mm-hmm. Quick segue. For those that want to go back into history a little bit, if you go back 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when IBM built the AI that beat the humans in Jeopardy, in essence, they did the same type of work, right? They had to to take the search results and create an answer. So ChatGPT isn't doing anything that's that significantly different. Now, if you understand that it's basically giving you a much more human way of searching content and getting an answer, that's kind of your first level up. The next level up is going to be, okay, now how do you take that and make it more conversational? And this is where this whole concept of does it become sentient kicks in. So to me, it's tiering. The first one is we're going to see it in Bing. Bing is going to be glorified search or more improved search. Maybe that's a better way to say it. The next step then becomes, what are the different ways I can make it do things, like make a request? So, for example, if you're into programming, you can actually say, write the code that does this particular function. I've tried it, it works. It's rather scary. So, it gets back to experimentation. Now, if you go on LinkedIn, what you'll find is there are people that are sharing their experiences and say, here's the queries that we created that ChatGPT worked on. So I would think these best practices of asking the questions, you're going to see more of this rather than less.
Now, quickly, this is being recorded. You can watch this anytime back on my feed, and it'll also be on YouTube. Um, One thing that I really wondered about was what, and I did this as a test actually. I thought it was kind of cool. I asked ChatGPT if it wanted to be a guest on one of my LinkedIn lives, and it said it couldn't do it. I said all you're going to have to do is give a demo, and he said it was okay. Um, so I guess what I found in terms of asking a question, I think the best thing to do, like George says, to try it out. I think the best way that I see this working is as a chat bot. You know how you have you know when you go online now and you're chatting with something as customer service. I think Amazon does something along the lines. It's like it asks a bot asks you how it can help you, and I'm pretty sure that to some extent is what ChatGPT can be about. What do you think?
I think that's and as I'm just listening to the conversation, maybe there's a tiering,
Right.
level one chat, maybe level 1 through 5, and what you could do at each level. I'll have to think about what that might look like. But again, let me answer the question in a slightly different way.
Sure.
Instead of looking at Chat GPT as this thing that you communicate with, what I would do is for whatever space that you're in, and I saw looking at the list of people, there were some that were into, copywriting, and there were some people that were into writing, there were some people that were in development. There was a range of disciplines, as it were. What I would say to you is start asking yourself questions about how Chat GPT is either going to assist you in doing your job or disrupt how you do your job. And to me, you start asking yourself questions of, well, wait a minute. If I had to, if there's a part of what I do that's very repetitious or very rote, what might that look like? How might I have Chat GPT do that piece of work on my behalf? Or how could someone make it do that on their behalf? So to me, it's not so much about the novelty of Chat GPT. It really gets to what skills of yours is this going to be an assistive tool or is this going to be a replacement tool? Think of it from that perspective. And I think that will help drive better questions rather than just what do I kind of ask it? So
And
you know your space better
right.
than anybody, right? So that would really be the advice.
I mean, ChatGPT, there are going to be a whole bunch of jobs that are going to be needed, a whole bunch of humans, a whole bunch of a backstory to this. And I think the more you know about it, the better, because um, I don't know what the future holds for this. I don't, but I think,
Oh, I do. Oh, I
well,
see
that's,
scary.
that's, that's
Oh,
why you're here.
I
That's
see
exactly why
scary
you're
stuff.
here.
I mean, I see if you had to give me my first impressions or contact centers are going to be very interesting in terms of, you think about pressing keypads and, press one to get here and press two to do this. Well, if you get rid of all of that and you can just start asking questions, um, you're either going to get to the right person much faster or potentially you're going to get your answer without having to interact with a human. I think that's 2 to 3 years out. The next one for me, I think, if you're into IT, look at Microsoft Power Apps. If you take the $10 billion investment and the work that they're doing to generate code, I can only imagine where this thing's going to be 2 years out. I think even in the medical space, medical and legal, anywhere where there's just reams of documentation and reams of information, all of those, if you're a paralegal and you had to find case law, I can only imagine what ChatGPT is going to do in that space. So to me, it's about if you deal with a volume of information, again, legal, medical, I'd really be looking closely into these to say what's the disruption, what's the impact.
So, George, where else? I mean, would you be able to find the latest happenings and updates? I mean, besides yourself, I mean,
Well, I was going to say myself, but
I mean, no, of
so
course you are. But I mean,
I know.
other
The
places that you would suggest?
I'll be honest with you. I don't. I'm going to give you two answers. One, I don't know if I have found my go-to place just yet,
Hmm.
like my all-knowing, all-powerful. I mean, there's lots of different ones that are out there. What I would tell you to do is the simplest and easiest one is start with Google Alerts. Just come up with Chat GPT-3. If you haven't used Google Alerts will you basically give it a search word or words, and it will do that searching on your behalf on a daily, weekly, basis. I would tell you to start there, and then as I go on, I'm looking for sites, but it just seems everybody is reporting on this. So again, I'm looking at this from a slightly different perspective. I'm looking at it kind of a structure, as it were, and then all of these other sub pieces are telling me, well, I need to learn this or I need to understand that. So that's why you could start with me. I can filter out some of the noise, but
Well,
uh,
whoever figures this
Google
out, like
Alerts,
you can do, I'm sure Twitter has a hashtag on it. I know
Twitter.
on LinkedIn you can do a search on hashtag ChatGPT. I
Yep.
think whoever can really figure out the best way to put it together.
Well, remember this, and again, this is why I like to do these. It, so that not all information is going to be relevant for who or what you're doing. So I think one of those challenges is while you can do those searches, I would almost tell you to see if you can find a community that is, and again, it could be a LinkedIn community, it could be a Twitter community. I don't necessarily care which one, but you're probably better off finding a community of people that are asking a similar question, because I think it's going to be more beneficial to talk about those impacts in a group rather than try and do this as an individual. Because I think the space is too big. I think there's too much noise where if all you do is focus on the Chat GPT piece, you're not really getting out to how you as an individual might be impacted. So
And
to me, I would try and find a like-minded group.
you bring a good point. Like marketing people, copywriting people, public relations people, people in that space should all be getting together and talking about that, because a lot of them are probably more concerned about their content and how you can determine Chat GPT versus non-Chat GPT. And every industry has its different challenges. And I think the most important thing is understand that it's there, understand what it's about, and as you say, definitely play with it. Because I mean, I've spent a lot of time playing with it. I actually had to do a recipe for chocolate cake, and it came out with a pretty good one, which I actually used. Because it's almost like the latest shiny object, but it's a much larger shiny object than the other ones we've had.
Put the one up, Ken, from John at 138. Is it invasive?
Yep. Is it invasive to personal information?
So let's break that question into two distinct pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Piece number one is, I'm going to go back. Put this up for a second, Ken.
The slides,
Yeah.
sure. Yep.
So let's go back here for a second. Right now in Chat GPT-3, thematically, assuming it didn't have access to, some dark web information about, any one of us, this model should be PII free. Now the question becomes,
What's PII?
I'm sorry, personally identifiable information, PII.
Okay. Good.
Thank you. So there's no personal information that should, and if it is, they can work on filtering that out, right? But as long as they're not using that as a main input, there shouldn't be personal information. Now let's talk about how these things get used. And I can use the Alexa as an example. In between your interface and the model, well, who or what is keeping track of that? Right. So, if you follow, even if we take something non AI based TikTok, right, this idea of who has that information and who's mining it is kind of question number one. And that's from the interface before you get to the engine. The act of the engine actually picking up that PII and using it, that becomes a different question because there's different ways that they might be training their data sets or how they're examining the data coming in. So at the moment, and again, there's bad actors, I get it. I'm not so much worried about the PII that might sit in a GPT-3 model, but if somebody figures out a way to really make this conversational, most of your personally identifiable information or secrets about you that you decide to share could easily be stored in this middle section, and who knows who has access to it. So that's a really great question. And again, let's break it into the model versus the mechanisms that you have to go through to get to the model. And I think I'd worry more on the left-hand side than the right-hand side.
As an example, job descriptions, repetitive tasks. So that's a good example of a repetitive task.
Perfect. Yep.
And I'm sure everyone. I mean, there are all things we do all the time. I remember with Alexa, we take a lot of this stuff for granted now, and it's all part of our lives. And I think this is just going to be another part of our lives.
It will be, except the difference this time, and if you really look at this historically, and if we really go back to the early days of even the PC, a lot of this was about personal productivity, right? It improved the person's productivity. For example, using Excel, right? Excel was a big deal because you no longer had a piece of paper and a ledger. If you look at Word, you no longer had a typewriter, right? So these were kind of things that made you, productive. But if you look at what ChatGPT is doing, ChatGPT is creating. And I'm not really aware of a period of time that we had a tool that truly created this. And oh, by the way, this is just on the ChatGPT. We didn't get to DALL-E and images and movies and all this other stuff that's going on. We're just talking about, one of many engines. So this idea that the engine can create something is really this, interesting moment in time where it's just not the tool, it's what it can produce. So
what I wanted to get a sense of, if people can put in the chat some of the things they'd like George and I to maybe talk about on a second session,
sure,
that might be easier because this is how we can really get our content. Because I could see us going crazy. So I think,
well, welcome to my life.
No, but the more that I know about what people are looking for, the better. I just wanted to have this basic introduction today and make it available, because I think that there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of information. Someone like yourself, you're as close to an expert in this field that I know, and you've been doing this for a very, very long time.
But yeah, don't be whoops.
Nope.
Lost my earbud. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear, because again, I'm so close to this sometimes that I get blind. And let me put this up, Ken, just so people can have it.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So again, for those that didn't see this when I kicked it off, I now stream every Sunday morning from 9 to 9:30. The replays, in a sense, are on my YouTube channel. So my YouTube is my repository, in a sense. But I now stream to Facebook, Twitch, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So whichever one you're on, you can get me there. I just started Substacking. I put out a couple of articles, and then I had to take a little break, but I'm going to be resuming that shortly. And I have to redo my website. I got a couple ideas. I haven't gotten to that.
I'm looking at the comments in here just to let you know things people want to know about. Usage for HR, call centers, recruiting and job search, healthcare, for sure also.
I'll give you an excellent example because I did a little due diligence on this.
Sure.
One of the things that you can do is for interview practice. If you have not interviewed in quite some time, not only can you say, what are the top interview questions, you can ask it, what are the interview questions at a company? how might I answer a certain interview
Yeah.
question, and it really gives you the insights as to how you do that. So this whole idea of even being able to prep for an interview, you can use ChatGPT, and I've done a couple questions, and it really came back with some. Now, mind you, some answers were good. There were other answers that you have to be smart enough to. Here's a perfect example. I forget the exact question, but it was like, tell me about your last project or something like this. And what it did was, instead of saying, here's what I did, it talked about we. It talked about we. It talked about the team. And normally the interviewer is going to say, no, 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 no. What did you do? So you have to take some of the responses with a grain of salt, but it at least gives you the stubs or the ideas as to how to answer those questions. So if you wanted to do something that was really tangible right now, just focus on top interview questions and how might you answer them. And if you haven't done it in a while, it's a good exercise actually.
Yeah, I actually posed a question to ChatGPT. How would I answer the question, tell me about yourself? Because people get that all the time.
All the time. Yep.
And it was enough of a template that someone could use that and customize it. And I think that's a very important part about is customizing the tool. And recruiters do this all the time, and as well. It's such a great tool, for sure.
Well, so two good questions there. So Simon's question, I start with Simon's.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's been doing it for a while. I mean, if you think about it, the Alexa's been listening for a while. The phone's been listening for a while. So, again, let's go back to my diagram. That's why I put this diagram together. You really need. This is why, if you think about a lot of technologies, people just pick these things up and use them. I actually look at what the interactions are. And again, in this part, this is why I simplified at least this diagram. Remember, you're going to have your interfaces. So the Alexa's sitting over here, but it could also be a web-based application. It really doesn't matter. And what you enter here, or what you put in here, or what capability it has here, for between that and the actual model itself, this is where that information could be used by a bad actor. So when we talk about, it's not so much the phone. I would put more trust in at least a larger company from the perspective of they've got enough deep pockets that they can at least hopefully do the right thing. I haven't really heard of anybody in Amazon doing bad things with the Alexa platform, right? And there's a reason for that. I think when you get to smaller companies and you don't have the oversight, that's where the risks are potentially higher. And then, understand these models are going to get trained, and they're going to get trained to do a certain thing. They're really not, unless there's a bad actor. So that's why we talk about that question, which part of the food chain do you have to worry about? It's kind of why I put this diagram together.
This is the thing. If too many people ask the same question, will this affect your future answers?
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, well, so at the end of the, I mean, it's a good question, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of weightings. I mean, if you really look at this engine, when this beast is being populated, they can put certain weights on certain things. So when that deep model is actually built out, certain weights can lend it to be a certain answer. Now, whether or not that gets into the training data for that, or whether those responses, I guess it depends on who's setting the weights.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is really the right answer to the question. But again, they're just taking a corpus of data and letting this thing learn on its own. Is the
And
idea?
it's true. Like, think about anything on the internet, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. I mean, we've all put our information out there, and I think there's a little bit of a aversion to it in the very beginning. But this is all over our lives now.
And I would say this to you, and again, this is from my memory. About a month ago, 3 weeks ago, I did the write a resignation letter in the style of Dr. Seuss,
Right.
and it was pretty funny. I mean, the first half they had the rhyming scheme. It was actually pretty
Right.
good. I had a friend try it just the other day, and the answer was actually different. So it's not going to generate the same answer every time. I don't know why, but it won't generate the same answer every time.
So I assume we can count on another session of this, George.
Oh, sure. Sure, sure, sure. But I'd love to hear again if people have different, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
different questions.
I want to make sure this is being recorded first of all, and it will be available, and we'll make sure it's available. And as a follow up, I mean, George and I are going to be monitoring the chat. We're going to be putting our thoughts in, but use this also as an opportunity to connect with everyone else here on this call, or I should say on this session. And I really hope people learn about ChatGPT as much as possible. I'm kind of half waiting for the movie to be created from
The movie.
ChatGPT or something like that, or the concert or something like that, or having like a whole album of songs from ChatGPT. I could just see that.
Yeah, but if I had to give you my parting words, you want to embrace this, not run away from this. This is the genie's out of the bottle. You're not putting the genie back in. Um, and it's those that understand how it works, which is why I've got this diagram up here. The more you understand how it works, the better positioned you're going to be. And
Right.
then the second piece of advice is you really need to think about what you do and the value you provide, and does chat gpt and its successors augment what you do or replace what you do? Because if
Mhm.
it does, you know sooner rather than later.
Well, well, thank you so much, George. This was very enlightening to me again. I hope everyone on the call got a lot out of it. I know
So
they did.
Gerald asked the question. My LinkedIn profile, everything about me is Keep Pace, KeepPace. So it's linkedin.com/n/keep pace.
Well, again, I want to thank you very much. I can't even keep up with these comments. It's so great. If you have any questions afterwards or anything you want to let us know about, make sure we know about it. And we will schedule at least one other session. And we look forward to talking about this again and again. So once again, everyone, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye, everyone.